I'm especially proud to stand here today with the veterans of America from Delaware Valley.
Yes.
And if the President or anyone else says to you that we do not support the troops, tell them to tell it to the veterans.
That's right.
The veterans against the war, because they are the ones who have paid the price in the past, who are paying the price now, and who know what the human cost of this war really means.
Here's the Navy and the U.S. Air Force right here.
The Navy and the U.S. Air Force right here as well. Thank you very much for being here with us. I want to begin on a sober note. The war in Iraq is not a mistake. The war in Iraq is a crime.
Yes.
According to international law. I'm quoting now from the Nuremberg proceedings, which said that a war of aggression is the supreme international crime that includes all other crimes within itself. There have been many crimes that have happened and that continue to happen in that sad country of Iraq, but it all goes back to the beginning of a war of aggression that had no justification, no moral justification, and no justification according to international law.
Indict the actors.
Last night, the President said that a deadline to bring the troops home from Iraq would be a deadline for defeat. Let me tell you something. The deadline for defeat has long since passed.
Right.
The deadline for defeat has a name. The name for that defeat is Abu Ghraib. You remember Abu Ghraib and the terrible photographs that are seared into our memories. The deadline for defeat has another name. We remember Iraq, but do we remember Fallujah? Why don't we remember Fallujah? Because the American media does not publicize what has happened to cities and civilians in Iraq. Why don't they give the same kind of attention to the plight of the civilians in Iraq that was given to Virginia Tech?
Yep.
Slaughters like that happen in Iraq every day. 2 and 3 times a day. According to the best statistics, which are also not reported by the mainstream media, there are now over 100,000 casualties, or 1 million casualties in Iraq. 1 million. There are 2 million refugees. There is a refugee crisis as people have spilled over into the border in Syria without adequate preparation, into Jordan and other nearby countries. These people are living in refugee camps with inadequate supplies. And the United Nations issued a report within the last 10 days saying that 7 million people in Iraq are at risk. And that 70% of the children in Iraq are traumatized. Many of them have to walk to school past dead bodies. That's the situation that we have created in Iraq. Abu Ghraib and Fallujah for the people of Iraq was like 9/11 for us. It was that level of trauma, and we have never recovered from Abu Ghraib and from Fallujah, and we never can recover from those terrible mistakes. There is a budgetary crisis. Over $500 billion. It's $500 billion and counting that is being poured into this immoral and ill-advised war. Why don't the American people have adequate health care? Why don't we have adequate education for our children? Why aren't we spending money to end the environmental crisis? $500 billion are going up in smoke in Iraq. We cannot continue to fund military adventures like this and expect to deal with real and pressing needs at home and around the world.
Where's our media?
So there is a humanitarian crisis. There is a budgetary crisis. There is a media crisis, which is a crisis for democracy. It is no longer certain that your children and grandchildren and mine will grow up in a democratic society. We cannot have a democratic society without a free and independent media. But the media is so controlled and stifled right now in Iraq and elsewhere that the real truth about what is happening in that war and what is happening in other urgent crises in our country are not being reported. But finally, there is a security crisis. The United States is not the solution to the problems in Iraq. There will be no regional solution as long as we continue that war, as long as we continue to plant permanent military bases in Iraq. We have to say no permanent military bases. And we have to say no to the largest embassy in the world that is being constructed in the green zone in Iraq. This says to the Iraqi people and to the international community that the United States has no plans to leave Iraq. We have to ask not only for the troops to be brought home from Iraq, but for the military bases to be closed and for that embassy to be brought down to scale. If we had a truly democratic government in Iraq, these things would happen in a heartbeat. But the United States is not the solution to the security crisis in Iraq. The longer we stay there, the greater the danger, which is growing every day, of this becoming a regional war and of spilling over, especially into Iran. We have to say no to a wider war, and especially no to an attack on Iran. Unacceptable! So this is a crime that includes all other crimes within itself. We have to face what we have done as a nation. We have to face the magnitude of not just this mistake, but this war crime in order for us to repent and establish a new and humane policy of the United States toward the world, which stands for negotiations and diplomacy and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hunsinger. Dr. Hunsinger mentioned how we stand in solidarity with our veterans, and I'd like to call now on another veteran, Bruce Tornari. Bruce is a Vietnam combat veteran, both served in the United States Army and in the United States Marines. Bruce Tornari, please help me welcome him.